Bonjour, hi, welcome back to another Coffee Talk. For those of you who are not familiar with Coffee Talks, it's a series and a podcast I have where every Friday I sit down with a cup of coffee, I sip on it while I talk about different topics that have been on my mind for the past week, and this week is no exception. For a series that's called Another Coffee Talk, I rarely talk about the coffee I make, but today, damn, it hits. I don't know if it's the cold brew or if it's the ratio of sugar, creaminess, coffeeness. It's so good. Honestly, it's so good. I've been thinking about kind of cutting down on caffeine. I'm saying this like I drink like a bunch of coffee every day. I drink like one coffee a day, sometimes two when I feel very tired and exhausted, but I've been wanting to kind of cut caffeine from my life, but then when I have coffees like this, I'm just like, I can't do it. It's too damn good. Obviously, and as always, this is not the topic of today's coffee talk because we would be going around in circles for a little while. No, today we are talking about feeling old. It's funny because a little more than a year ago, I made a coffee talk about how I didn't feel like a real adult and how in my brain I was still kind of like a teenager and I didn't feel like I had my life together and I didn't feel like I was a real adult because what an adult was supposed to be like in my head didn't fit my description or the description that I had of myself. And now, a little more than a year later, I do feel like an adult and I feel like an old adult, not like old, but I'm feeling myself getting older and I don't know how we feel about it, because if we take a look back at almost a year ago precisely, when I was about to be turning 25, I was going through what one would call a quarter life crisis, which suited a lot of what was happening in my life. I was asking myself a bunch of questions, I was questioning myself on everything, and I wanted to kind of not necessarily do a 180, I wouldn't say that, but I wanted to give a meaning to my life at that point, and I wanted to make it all make sense, and I wanted everything to go my way, and I wanted to fit some sort of standards that now looking back, it's just like, it was a quarter life crisis. And now that I'm soon to be 26 in less than 2 weeks, I feel like the 26 is hitting a little differently. I feel like I'm a little bit wiser, but I also feel like I'm getting less and less relevant and less relatable to a certain extent. I know I'm like, this sounds like a lot and I'm probably exaggerating here, but it's still how I feel. It's still like what's rooted in me at the moment when I think about my age and when I think about me getting older. And don't get me wrong, it is a privilege and I'm really happy to be getting older and to be getting wiser and to be getting more wisdom as the years go by. But in what I do and in what I had envisioned for myself, being young is kind of like, I wouldn't say a criteria. That's not what it is, because being young should never be a criteria for anything. But I just feel like as I'm aging, the less and less I'm perceived as the like young and refreshing person in the room, if that makes sense. And I had a conversation about that with a friend of mine who's older than me, and he was saying essentially that I was getting older, and yes, at some point I will not be the young girl anymore who brings something new to the table, who's like a breath of fresh air, because I'm gonna be getting older and I'm not gonna be as pretty as a 20-year-old, and I'm not gonna be as quirky and funny and witty and quick as a 20-year-old. I'm not gonna know all the trends, and that's okay. But what comes with that, with letting go of that etiquette, if you will, is the knowledge and the wisdom, and people kind of take you a little bit more seriously because you know what you're talking about and you have more experience. This is what comes with getting older, is the experience, which 20-year-olds don't have, or not as much as a 26-year-old, for instance. I'm having a hard time kind of wrapping my head around that, because in my heart, I'm still I still consider myself young. Don't get me wrong. Like 26 is not that old. But when I compare myself to, and this is where the problem is at. I know I shouldn't be comparing, but it's, we all do it, and it's it's hard not to. But when I do compare myself to other 26-year-olds around me, I'm like, I know for a fact that I'm not at the same place as they are. But the thing is, I'm really happy with where I am. I'm so happy and so proud. And truly, I'm feeling like I'm privileged and blessed to be who I am and to have what I have and to do the job that I do and to live the life that I live. But sometimes it has me questioning myself because I'm not exactly where other people typically are, or generally speaking are at 26. I don't have a house. I don't have a car, which is pretty sad. And just for a lot of topics I cover in these coffee talks, I'm in this dilemma where I'm so happy with what I have and who I am and how far I've come. But there's still a part of me that wonders, what if, I never find a boyfriend and I never have a house and I have a car in like 10 years, which is not likely. I'm most likely going to have a car sooner than later, but it's all these things that I thought I would have or I would be at the ripening age of 26, but I don't. And it's okay because life happened a certain way and I wouldn't necessarily need a car right now. I wouldn't necessarily want a house to live in with somebody, ideally. But that whole thing, that whole idea and all those things that I should be having or that I should be wanting, they have me questioning myself about the what ifs, And with this in mind, knowing that I'm getting older and older, there's also a bunch of questions regarding family, relationships that arise because, well, again, I'm not getting any younger. In fact, I'm getting older. And not only am I getting older mentally, but physically, biologically. And, well, if I want a family one day, that's still debatable if I do want a family. But let's say that I do. Let's say that I meet someone that I want to have a family with. Is my body going to be able to keep up? And what I find the most disturbing, maybe disturbing is not the right word, but what I find the most odd, or the thing that has me questioning myself a lot, is honestly it's time running out, because I don't feel rushed to have a family, and I don't feel rushed to have a boyfriend, and I don't feel rushed to have a house or to buy a car. But at the same time, do I want to be 35 and have a kid at that age? Like, do I want to be pregnant at 35? I don't know. So it's like, I feel like I'm at this point where I have to make decisions, not only for now, but for my future self, and not just for like the span of the next year, the next 2 years, but I have to be thinking a little bit more long term, and I have to be making decisions for that. And it's hard because I've never really had to think about that before. And I've never felt the need to think about that, because to me it was just like, yeah, it's later. The kids are later. The house is later. The car is later. But now it is later, and I'm where I am today, which is fine. But there's a lot of questions that come with what I do, where I am, and who I am as of today. And what's, I think, the weirdest about that is that I'm not really necessarily questioning myself as an individual, but I'm questioning all these exterior factors that could have an impact on my life and on how I live my life. So the perfect example is if I end up having a partner and then we end up wanting a family. This is going to change my life drastically. If I want to buy a house, this is going to change my life drastically. The car, not so much. I will probably be able to see my family more frequently and be a little bit more free when it comes to taking myself from point A to point B. But it's like all these little things that are not necessarily related to the core of who I am, but that influence how I want to live my life and how I want to go around and about in life. And so they're kind of big questions, but at the same time, I feel like they don't matter that much because they're not related to my identity. They're not related to who I am. And I'm so happy and content and affirmative and proud of who I am, that because this is so strong, because those foundations are there, I'm like, it doesn't really matter if I have a house, and it doesn't really matter if I have kids or not. Well, it kind of does, but again, I still don't know the answer to that question, and it's going to depend on so many things. So it's like, I'm ready to make decisions and I'm ready for the next step, but I feel like for that next step to happen, some things need to change or some things need to happen. But again, I don't want to wait for life to happen. So it's a weird thing to be happening right now. And I know that age is truly just a number, and the society that we live in right now is kind of less strict on what you should be and what you should have at a certain age. You know, people have kids later today and they go to school for a lot longer, so they end up graduating and getting a job later in life, and they end up settling in life later than they used to 20 years ago, 40 years ago. And so I can't really compare myself to my parents or my grandparents, but still, when I do compare myself to people my age or in my generation or like close to my age, I still feel like I'm not necessarily missing out, because that's not the feeling, but I feel like I'm missing something, but I'm not missing out, if that makes sense. Does it? I don't know. It's as if I'm ready to settle in a way, but at the same time, I don't want to settle. So settle might not be the right type of word, but I feel like I'm ready for my life to, again, not stay the same. That's not what I mean, but let's just put it that way. To stay the same, quote unquote, or just, continue on what it is right now and just like carry on with what I'm doing now. Like, okay, that's the thing. I don't feel like I'm about to make a drastic change in my life ever, because I'm really content with, again, what I have, who I am, what I do. So I don't feel the need to do a drastic change and do a 180. So with that in mind, it's as if I'm ready to kind of put my roots down and ground myself, because I am satisfied with what I have without feeling the need and the want to settle, because I don't want to settle for something I don't want. So I'm at this cross line where, yeah, I don't want to wait for life to happen to me, but at the same time, I kind of need things to happen to me to make these kind of decisions. And I don't want to be just sitting there waiting for stuff to happen and not seize every opportunity. But at the same time, when I do take these opportunities, when I'm working, when I'm kind of investing in myself for right now, I'm not investing for my future self. And one doesn't cancel out the other, but at the same time, kinda. Are you following me here? Because I have trouble following myself. So I'm sorry about that. And what's funny is that when I have this kind of conversation with my parents, for example, or my grandparents, they still see me as a young and refreshing person, because in their eyes, it's normal. I'm always going to be their daughter or their granddaughter. So they're always going to see me as vulnerable and fragile and as like the little kid that they have to protect. And I'm not mad about that. It's just that it makes me feel like my feeling about getting old is not valid. And that's completely normal, because this is what parents do. They're there to care for their children, to protect them until they're not on earth to do just that. So a parent can't help but to be a parent. And I talked with my mom about this, how I've been feeling like weird about getting old. But at the same time, I'm so happy, because 20s are so freaking weird. So I'm happy to be approaching my 30s, but at the same time, I'm kind of afraid because I feel like time is running out, but not really, but kind of. Anyway, circling back to what I said about having this conversation with my mom and how I compare myself to her when she was 26 and how she had a house, a husband, a kid, a pet, a car. And she told me that she wished she had waited before having children. But what if she waited in her 30s, I don't know. And I don't necessarily want to wait till my 30s to have children if I do want children, if I end up wanting children. But, you know, I can't really force it. So it's like, again, circling back to what I said about having all these questions and being at a cross point, at a crossover, whatever it's called, the thing where the path cross. Anyway, I feel like it's a turning point in my life where I could just be single and no kids for the rest of my life, or I could take actions in actually making a future with a partner with children, or not. That's the thing. I don't even know what I want. I don't know which way I want to go because I'm uncertain, and I'm at this point where I'm not young, but I'm not old. So what am I then? Middle-aged? Again, I'm exaggerating here. I know 26 is still relatively young, but it's not young, and it's not old. So this is why it makes me feel even weirder about it, because I'm like, even myself, I'm thinking that this feeling is not valid, and it's just like random, and it's like, oh, it's gonna fade away anyway, and I shouldn't be overthinking it, and I shouldn't be thinking about that, but it's still the way that I feel. And I have a friend of mine, the same one who I talked about this with, who says I overthink a lot of things, but I guess this is my way of processing things and just thinking them through and thinking out loud and wrapping my head around an idea and a feeling. And maybe I am overthinking it. Maybe I'm overthinking turning 26 and eventually 27, 28, 29 and reaching 30. And maybe by that time, I will have these questions answered. Maybe I won't. Maybe I will have changed some things about me. Maybe I will have a partner. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll have a car. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll have a house. I doubt that because the market is horrible. But hey, who knows? So many things can happen so quickly. And I know that. And this is why I want to give myself a little bit of grace. And I want to give myself the time to let things happen. I don't want to rush into anything, but again, I'm approaching 30 eventually because time passes so quickly, but so many things can happen during that time. So it's like, I want to trust life. That's the thing. I want to trust myself. I want to trust life, but I don't want to sit there and wait. I want to take actions and I want to be proactive and I want to enjoy life. I want to live my best life, but my body can't keep up as much as when I was 20. So it's like, yeah, it's a vicious cycle. Is it vicious? I don't know, but it's a cycle and it's like coming back and around the same questions and going back and forth from the pros and the cons and the ins and outs and the positive and negative, whatever. Wow, this coffee slaps. I just feel like reiterating the file of this. It's so freaking good. Wow. So yeah, and honestly, that's just the mental and psychological part about aging, because I've been noticing my body changing and aging as well. But I'm not sure I want to get into that today because that's a whole other kind of thing, and I honestly don't feel like covering that. So that is definitely my cue to wrap it up here. Thank you for watching or listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting me. I truly, 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 and honestly mean it. Hopefully I've made a little difference in your day today. If you would like to make a difference in mine, you know what to do. And I'm going to wish you in bonne journée.